This is part of the vehicle transport system that I believe transports vehicles loaded with fentanyl from this area. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna leave this on because I'm gonna go around the corner here to this complex that's right across from the school that I believe has a small batch clandestine fentanyl manufacturing lab. And one of the reasons I believe that it has it is because when you understand the psychology of Armenian organized criminals, their idea of a good idea is the least expected idea. What you don't think they would do or could get away with is what they resort to. So this is the complex. Actually, I'm glad I came this way because I want to get this 8ZUF242. I believe this vehicle and that SUV relate to this complex. Gonna leave this on because I got a hunch. I mean, I already got it on. It's not even space because I could upload it. I don't have to edit it. Compiling data is a broad stroke operation. Sifting through data is more fine-tuned. The balance is you don't want to get so much data that it's irrelevant to sift through. But you don't want to miss out on data that's relevant to sift through. So like, I could admit that I documented this guy's truck incorrectly. But this is good too because I can look for the Lexus because I think they're doing. So I think that they finished the batch at this complex that's next door to me. Because that was the day that they moved the Lexus out that had been parked there. Took the spot of the Tesla. The Tesla was there from October of 2022 to at least February. I think it could have even been March. Then they stuck in another car, which I think is that one over there. And then they replaced it with the Lexus mini SUV. I forgot what the brand is. Oh no, it's one up further up. Is the one that they had in there, and then they replaced it with a new. They got rid of the Tesla. They got a new that SUV. But I do want to go this way too. Yeah, so the complex here I'm walking by, this has a clandestine, at least one unit is a clandestine lab. And I don't even think this whole unit, because the place that I lived in, where I was first came up with this idea, it wasn't about the whole unit. It was, from what I could gather, it was just the upstairs bathroom. That's when I realized that they were small batch. And then when I saw the record of a bust, or the report of a bust, that $6 million worth of fentanyl was recovered, and it was in a spare tire in the back of a small size SUV. So it wasn't even a full size spare tire. That's when I also realized that when you have these complexes, and there's more than it's broad stroke fraud. So during COVID, a lot of COVID relief fund fraud was the bread and butter. So the place that I was at, nobody worked. I was working when I first moved in there, but then I stopped working in January, and I didn't work till April 9th. I got hired March 3rd, but it took me till April 9th to actually be able to start working. And the interesting thing was that being there all the time made me realize that nobody in the complex, it was 4 units, townhouse. There were 2 people in each unit. 2 fat, disgusting pig Armenian males in the 4th unit, and a Hispanic male and a Hispanic female, unit number 3. I was renting a room in unit number 2 that was supposed to have a roommate, but he was an Italian guy who actually had the name of a famous Italian mafia guy, which is funny, Tony Knapp. His name was Anthony Napoli. But he claimed to be living off-site and just keeping the place while he was staying with his girlfriend. And then unit 1 was 2 white females. And what I ended up discovering was that none of them work. An Armenian corporation probably owned it. It was an Armenian handyman. And from what I could gather, they were all incentivized to live there in the units as a kind of like a security measure. Like, as part of the team. So, but the guy that was renting the room to me, he was thinking, I can make more money off of this by renting out the room. I don't have to live there, and I don't have to be around that, because his room, the other thing too is, based on my hypothesis that it was the upstairs bathroom, his room was the room right next to it. So that put him, in a sense, at a greater risk than everybody else. And I got the impression that the way he went about remedying that, or mitigating that risk factor, was by not living there. Because the way that the units were structured, the bathroom, the way they make bathrooms, his bathroom shared the wall and the plumbing with the Unit 3, which I believe was the only clandestine lab in the unit, in the whole complex. And so I got the impression that he didn't want to be there, and they were like, fine, just whatever, rent the room out. So he rented out there was a 3-bedroom townhouse in Toluca Lake. Well, all of them were 3-bedroom. The Hispanic male and Hispanic female, they're the ones that I believe were in the unit that was doing the manufacturing. Like, as I developed this theory and made it more publicized on my social media, they were just I was there from October to June, and it was about March that I really started to make the connection, or the theory, or the conspiracy theory, or the paranoia, whatever you want to call it, about the operation that was being there. It was after I got closer to June that I started to further develop that and realize that on top of the fentanyl manufacturing, which relied on the Armenian guys were like the managers, the overseers, and the Hispanic people were just the manufacturer, the employees. The white girls were cover, and so was my alleged roommate. But then I realized that on top of that, because now he subleased to me because he told me he was leasing. So the whole complex was owned by one individual. And the structure of the rent was that person rented out each unit to the people. During the COVID pandemic, what you had all this rent, aid, and you had unemployment. It was like $700 a month, or a little bit more than that, with no questions asked. So my roommate would tell me, "Oh, I'm not working right now. Claimed to do video editing," and so he was out of work because Hollywood went down. The girl, the Hispanic female, as I started to develop this, one time when I was coming back from my job, or I was going to meet a friend or something like that, but she was the only time I actually saw her outside the complex. She was sitting on the stairs, talking on her phone, really boisterously. Not boisterous, but, acting out in one sense. And she's like, "Oh, no, you know what? Just tell him to send me the treatment. Because once I read the treatment, then I'll be able to decide." And the friend that I was actually meeting, because, that had to do with meeting a friend. He was a location scout for productions like The Majestic with Jim Carrey, something called Go, and like one of the American Top Models or something like that, where they had some house, and Fear Factor. That was probably his longest, or one of his last projects. It's with Joe Rogan. So when I got in the car, I was like, "Man, this fucking bitch." And she was in gear like she was into fitness. I was like, "Look at this bitch. She's sitting on the steps talking about, just send," and I repeated, "Send me the treatment so I can read it and then I'll be able to decide." He was like, "Treatment?" He's like, that's the industry talk." And I was like, "Yeah, I get the impression that she's trying to project herself as having some kind of professional connotation." And he was dismissive. He was like, he knew I had extreme ideas, and he had no interest in them. And that was, whatever. But he didn't take them wasn't cynical about them. So how did this work? Oh, so then the unit 3, they have um, they had this leak coming out of the complex. Now it was coming out of the roof. So one of the things that in my jailhouse runs and underworld adventures, I came to learn about, not a lot. I've never been in a meth lab, but learned enough about meth manufacturing to know that, and weed too, that ventilation matters because of smell. And that water, access to water and hot water matters. So one of the things is the hotter you have to heat water. That takes energy. So if you're doing it in one unit, that unit's going to have unreasonably high levels of hot water. And that's when I started to realize, because our complex, like the water was here, where I'm at right now, I got to leave the water on. I feel bad when I fucking do it. I save as much water as I can. And I guess if I was not just such a little chicken shit, that I would just jump in a cold shower. But I wait for the water to warm up, and that takes like 5 to 7 minutes that I have to run the water. But over there, it was instantaneously hot, and it was freaking scalding hot. I mean, I liked it in the sense, when I first got there, I liked it because doing dishes was freaking easy. And I mean, all you have to do is mitigate the heat with the cold with taking a shower, so there was no problem whatsoever. But I thought I had a picture of it. But over there, I started to realize that the complex, the owner of the complex, kept the water, had the property manager, which was different than that, the owner, keep the water at high levels for the sake of reducing suspicion. Like, it's the whole complex. It's not just the one unit. And darn, I thought I had it. But so the water leaked from every day, 24/7, nonstop, out of and they're Armenians, right? So there's some cheap motherfuckers. And one time they told me that a plumber was coming. And at that particular time, I was trying to get a DEA agent to come out and check the place out. But he kept brushing me off for personal reasons. Disinterest, really. And it was like I'd already been trying. And so then I thought, well, okay, well, they told me that, it's going to be between 12 and 4 o'clock, a plumber is going to come. So I was like, all right, well, plumber's going to come. Well, then let me tell this guy in an email. And I used the Wi-Fi of the guy that I was subleasing from. So here's the leak. Oh. That was nonstop, 24/7. And that black line ran all the way up the 2 stories to the roof of the unit, which made me think that they were using, again, the bathroom, which is in the middle, not along the wall. That's why it shared my roommate's bathroom shared the wall with the Unit 3's bathroom. That they were using the part of the hot water as the filtration and running it up into the roof and then letting it just seep down the middle. I think their intention was to use the pipe, but I don't know how frequently they were doing it. But that was just nonstop. And if you understand, this is the San Fernando Valley. So, like, my electricity bill in this place right here in Burbank, which is just the next city over, the highest electricity use that me and my previous roommate had last year was in October, because October was one of the hottest months. So, and then when we got into January and February, there's no rain. Maybe in February. So for there to be for that, I don't know what if it's mold or, but for that black to stay there made me start to realize that it had to be chemicals, not just water. And so when they got the report, hey, water's going to be off from 12 to 4 on this day. So I was like, okay. So I sent an email to the, actually, I think this might even be it. Five water repairs. Oh yeah, yeah. I told them water repairs on May 16th, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Okay, was when they did it. Trying to get him to just stop by. Tell him, look, you have full consent. You don't need a warrant because I live here. I'm a legal tenant. I can just open the door and let you into the complex. I could, if you want to, you could let you into my unit too, without any Monday water service is not impeded. Um, so as far as I can tell, this is I told them straight up, as far as I can tell, this is an Armenian power operation, be it a grow or a clandestine lab. I still insist that due to the black residue, it's stained the side of the building with, that it's not just weed. And considering a plumbing job on a Sunday, first of all, it was on a Sunday. So it's 10 a.m. to 12. So I tell him, look, maybe he's thinking it's my day off, I'm not going to come. The motherfuckers don't come at 10 a.m. to 12. Guess what time an Armenian pays? And the guy is obviously, I mean, I've been to prison. I know a former white supremacist character, the hair, the tattoos, and everything. And the plumber that shows up, knocks on my door at 8 o'clock at night for a non-emergency on a Sunday, and worked for 4 hours. Guess where? On the fucking roof. But whatever. Unifor seems to be security management and a direct Armenian power. And this the other thing too is I didn't understand. I didn't consider it an Armenian syndicate. I didn't know anything about higher levels of Armenian organized crime back then. I just knew enough through my basic, because of my own, again, underworld travels and shit like that, growing up in Sun Valley, and not necessarily, well, North Hollywood, not really North Hollywood, mostly Sun Valley, but spending some time in North Hollywood and a little bit in Burbank to at least know the ins and outs. Because in Sun Valley, the gang there was violent, and when I was there, they were enemies with Armenian power, because the violent boys rebelled against the Mexican mafia, and that brought them what's considered, it's called the blue light or the green light, or given the blues. And they were marked for 9 years. They rebelled. They refused to pay any taxes to the Mexican mafia. So the Mexican mafia had put out an order that any gang that had 13 affiliated with its name was ordered to attack violent boy gang members on sight. But at the same time too, the Mexican mafia had declared like no drive-bys. Is still a standing order for the Mexican mafia. If a Mexican, and I even think it's gonna be curious to see if this black guy just did a drive-by here recently in the San Fernando Valley. I got a feeling that, I mean, I can't see the Mexican mafia allowing him to live, because this is their turf, and he did a drive-by on their turf. But I could be wrong. But they have a standing order still. So if any Mexican does a drive-by basically in California, um, which is also interesting. Well, it's kind of tricky because there was those guys up north that did what a drive-by is and a freeway shooting. I don't know how they make the distinction. There's it's some kind of just like a courts. It's a bunch of opinions and shit like that. But for the most part, if you do a drive-by and you're Mexican, you get killed because drive-bys were fucking up the drug gang for the Mexican mafia. So within all of that, they couldn't do drive-bys, and then at the same time, the Mexican mafia in 1993 to 1995 forced street gangs to tone it down and like, hey, you guys need to focus on making money, quote unquote, for us, which was IEG or IE, ergo for us, really was it what it was about, so that you could pay more rent so we can make more money. If you don't listen to us, we're gonna hurt you. And the Violent Boys were like, fuck you, we're not gonna give you no money. So the Mexican Mafia said, all right, well, all of you other 13 gangs, you guys can't fight each other. But if you want to vent, you can do anything you want to any Violent Boy member. And Armenian power in 1993 was given the X3 by the Mexican Mafia because of their capacity for making profits off of fraud type shit. So, oh, and then I was wondering how I finished this off. When did I send this? I sent this 5:15. I'm so fucking crazy. So, okay. I told them I was leaving 6/1. This is my last effort. I just got a notice that on Sunday, the Armenian property manager is bringing a plumber again to fix something. Since the last repairs, the water hammer has ceased completely. And for about 2 weeks, the leak from Unit 3, not the roof, stopped too. However, for the last 5 to 8 days, there has been at least 1 gallon of water an hour seeping out from the same spot. As far as I can, okay, then I got that. Oh, then I said, that's my 2 cents. Best wishes on Leo Memorial Day, because May 15th is Police Officer Memorial Day. Like, he asked me if I ever contacted the LAPD. I was like, no, honestly, I never contacted the LAPD. After we communicated, the property manager announced 2 days of plumbing repairs, 1 day of interrupted service, of which the 6-month-long leak from the roof in Unit 3 and the water hammer noise coming from the same unit have completely ceased. Granted, I personally believe that there is criminal activity. I'm just a janitor. I have no evidence that likely Armenian power with ties to at least one federal agent, Jason Arroyo, are operating out of this 4-unit complex and are aware of my effort to expose them to the proper authorities. As after months of complaining and only receiving a medley of ridiculous explanations, because they were like, one of the things the guy that was running the room from, he's like, oh, I talked to, because he knew the guy's name, I talked to whatever Chavez, and yeah, he was telling me, oh, he hears it too whenever they're doing laundry. And again, it was, they didn't, anyways, I don't gotta get into how frequent and what the time too. It didn't go all night. It was never earlier than 6 a.m. and it was never later than 11 p.m. As after months of complaining, okay, explanations, and a resistance to repair, seems emailing you lined up with them remedying all the issues. Oh, so I came to the conclusion, suggested anything nefarious. There's still some black and green stain running 2 stories from where the leak was, but with COVID and it only being a 4-unit complex and a sublet tenant, I have no rights or recourse. Activity has greatly increased in the complex, which I am the only person of 7 other residents that actually has a job I have to go to, which isn't telling in these times of remote work and unemployment. As I was unemployed from 1/6 to 4/8, this became easily observed. But to finish as honest as I started, I really just wanted to ask you personally if you know or work with federal agent Jason Arroyo. I can only say for certain he is involved in tax evasion and employment violation through his ties to a fraudulent security firm he runs with his brother Jeff Arroyo. And that doesn't prove he is complicit in Armenian organized crime. That might have been the first time I actually used Armenian organized crime. Beyond nepotism, but that doesn't fall under your jurisdiction. I met him twice while employed for him as an unlicensed security guard at Global Vision. The last time was the evening a homeless participant at LA Family Housing reported to me there appeared to be an abduction or a holding hostage of a female in a top model BMW at a hotel between the facilities. He told me that she was crying and struggling to get out of the car, and a Hispanic male entered the vehicle, roughed her up, and exited the vehicle, locking her in again, obviously against her will. I called LAPD for that and stood outside the hotel driveway waiting for a response or to see if the suspect left. Federal agent Arroyo showed up to the site, the only time he did in my 4 months at that post, just to instruct me that it was not my job to report such matters to law enforcement officers that did not involve LA Family Housing, his private client, and that I should clock out of my shift and leave. I attempted to further explain that the scene as described, and he waved me off with a hand gesture, reiterating it wasn't Global Vision's responsibility or mine as their employee. I complied. It was a lasting impression, as you can see. Now, to be further honest, I have no reason to think you will act any more diligently than he. I mean, this is only LA, where the most powerful cartel in the world has set up its main base of operations, utilizing civilian assets placed as sophisticatedly as Jade. That's joint advanced deployment. Shoot, I forgot what the E is. This is a AI that the military uses for planning out urban invasions. Can plan out urban occupations. And that doesn't happen without high level power. Luckily, I'm employed and my coworkers are doctors and nurses, and I dare say North Hollywood LAPD as well as Burbank. So while I am powerless to get the ball moving on any actual investigation, I have a social blanket of security. I mean, technically, if I am remotely close, I am using the Wi-Fi provided from the renter, which amounts to Armenian power, to send this. So secrecy and social stigmas don't concern me. My grandfather taught me documentation is power, and so I'm willing to be the blunt end of your dismissive professionalism for the sake of personal insurance. The worst case scenario in my world right now would be to instigate you to investigate me as a potential suspect for anything, as I do feel that I have made myself a target of Cartel Sinaloa. See, I didn't even know about Cartel Jalisco at this time. Interesting. On many levels. Well, simply, I didn't understand what was happening was that Armenian organized crime was, and the Mexican mafia had partnered with Cartel Jalisco at this time, and they were betraying, working in collusion to oust Cartel Sinaloa, which since now in 2023, they've succeeded in. While I am vocal on social media as a means of self-preservation, I admit I have avoided crossing this line with Leos, as I have been a vile dick for most of my life. Again, to be honest, amidst all this, I also must admit I have an inkling that BPD has developed a distant affinity for me, as they have seen the level of dedication. Well, that's out the window. I am of the mind that NoHo Division, who I have had septically bad blood with, I think I made that up, have a novel interest in my rantings, but have no means of taking on Cartel Sinaloa in LA. Sinaloa. Any more than the DEA has proven able. So I am either an egomaniacal narcissist, paranoid, mentally ill individual who performs complex tasks in a critically sensitive work environment with a degree of precision that marvels the observation of career medical staff, or my work ethic and observation skills are matched in their capacity. Either way, documentation is power. In my opinion, being boisterous like this has protected me so far from direct attacks, but has made me vulnerable to the several thousands of Angelenos and out-of-state Americans who flock to LA to facilitate Cartel Sinaloa's daily operations, and to whom my rhetoric is a direct threat, as much as it has proven not to be. Silence and indifference is what organized crime traditionally relies on to thrive, and I have a job to do, so silence is not an option. I have faced the minions of Cartel Sinaloa since May 1st, 2020, hordes of homeless in their service, waves of sureños, swarms of Crips and black hustlers from all across the U.S., masses of Armenian infiltrators, and even the Mongols, face to face, and stood my ground on the principle that documentation is power. Come to think of it, in the heat of this experience, just 3 days into it, totally perplexed on the scale of human activity this network demonstrated able to draw on, yet having no clue what it was I was facing, as I desperately walked the streets of Pasadena, crunching the numbers, I decided to name it publicly. So at about 1 in the morning, I decided to use Facebook as my soapbox and coined the term the electric mafia. Within minutes, a voice called out to me from about 50 yards behind me, "Hey, you! Yeah, you! What are you doing?" Preparing for an engagement, I recorded this event on my phone in case legal matters arose. Out of the blue, a Pasadena PD patrol vehicle with one officer popped up at the intersection. I was waiting for the person because, yeah, the light turned. So, when the light starts to blink, and it's a small street, and it was 1 o'clock in the morning, so it's like I could have crossed, but I also was thinking, well, the quicker I can engage somebody in a life-threatening situation and kill them, the easier it will be to file a police report. So as I came to the intersection, and it's like just like I said, it's a very small street, and 1 o'clock in the morning, there's no cars, and the hand started to just blink, which I've had plenty of time to cross the street, even with the blinking. I stopped because I was prepared for an engagement, and I was prepared to with the means to end somebody's life. And that was my rationale. I was like, well, I mean, at least then I'll have some evidence. Okay, person behind me 30 yards retreated. I pondered if the Pasadena Police Department was actually protecting me, but dismissed this as crazier than the idea anyone else was targeting me. As I walked to Lake and the 210, 7 to 9 black male transients grouped at the gas station, a Scion with 3 sureños abruptly pulled in, stopping with their vehicle hanging out on the northmost driveway. I got out in the traditional gangster display of false bravado, and a black and Hispanic male at the crosswalk, both with hoodies, mumbled, "Yeah, that's him." I decided to sit on the ledge right there and allow them to approach me to establish a legal defense if need be, as any attack of more than one person to me is an attempted murder and allows for me to defend myself in turn. As the two crossed the street and melded with the group of transients, a PD driven by a female officer swooped south and did an immediate U-turn to the gas station. She confronted the group, assumingly telling them to move it along, then approached the Scion and obviously told them to move their car. She forced the Cholos to retreat and drive off, never having gotten gas or bought anything. They returned to the proudly lingering transients and made them disperse. I convinced myself the Pasadena Police Department intentionally saved my life. I mean, I'm being a little generous there. She saved me. I would like to think, I wouldn't mind dating a cop. So I am not a credible source of intelligence in the fight against organized crime in the U.S., but if I am correct in my suspicion of these 3 PDs, they are. I didn't get into this to be a hero, just pathetic self-preservation. However, since May 1st, 2020, when I believe this all started, I was scared straight, to be frank. And now I can say I have doctors and nurses to support the claim. I became a hero and live as one daily, dedicated to serving those in far more dire straits than me, even if all this is true. But all that really means is that I'm just a janitor in an ER for not even 3 weeks now. I do what I can for cops who bring in suspects, and that amounts to making sure the area they rely on is spectacularly disinfected and visibly clean for their own sense of security in a volatile environment they have no control of. This email is a mix of emotion and stress and not meant as a slight against you, though I admit it is a little rough in that sense and a Herculean daily job you face. And the Herculean daily job you face. But as members of these criminal groups mentioned above, close proximity on me, and those I have social ties with, I admittedly am feeling a bit more concerned as to what is inevitably next. My distant hope, very distant, is that my conclusions of the PDs is accurate enough to say I was bent wrong. Because now that I live in Burbank, I see that one, I know for 100% fact that the Glendale PD is just a criminal organization. I mean, they hire cops. How they hire cops that aren't members of the criminal organization, I don't fucking know. But what I mean is the top cops and senior officers and the people that make decisions and get promoted, they're fucking just anti-American criminals. Burbank, those through social networks and reputation Glendale has infiltrated Burbank and carries enough influence to neutralize Burbank. That's why I walked by this unit and show you the right here. They do this shit here. How Burbank doesn't know is because the senior officers they determine what's priority, basically. If NoHo LAPD has anything remotely positive to say about me, that in and of itself is pretty freaking big. I have treated many of their officers very disgusting, particularly unforgivingly bad. They should rightly deem me as an enemy of all Leos, pragmatically speaking. But if I am right, they may not celebrate me as an ally. But between Leo to Leo, you and them, I don't think individual Leos matter, kinda. I think you get the sense from any random fellow Leos you might engage. I think they will portray me as a believer, for lack of a better word. But I've been wrong before, and I don't realistically expect to weigh my feelings as legitimate causes for any investigation at all. Sorry to exploit this line of communication. You were prompt in establishing and diligent in following up to satisfy my own delusions of grandeur or for complicating your workload. But in my world or frame of mind, I'm in survival mode and every detail counts. To me, this will either push them back and drive them to retreat, not likely, or force them to make a move. And I just hope I can respond adequately to survive it and publicize it accurately in a timely manner. Also in fairness, there really isn't any reasonable response to all this venting, really. I trust you are already doing all you can to fight these forces in real life. I don't want to burden you with having to counsel someone's suffering from anxiety you couldn't remedy anyways. I'd prefer you try the PDs on a whim, if anything, rather than respond to this clusterfuck of an email. Either way, I leave it in your care. I admittedly trust Leo's, period. And if there is any way I can cooperate, even if it requires a non-disclosure agreement, I would submit my energies towards such an endeavor readily. Thank you for your service, Timothy Gabry. Yeah. So, joke's on me.